we have Jayson, Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, right, as our like 1-2 punch basically. So we're trying to make sure that we know who we need to build around to have them be productive as well. We showed the world what that Lithuania can beat the US. It's the best. We have the most banners, so it's the best, not one of the best.
Welcome back to another episode of the Four Quarter Talk podcast. I'm Josh Masaki, joined by
Matas Baranauskas.
And we've got special guest, Boston Celtics coach, Benas Matkevičius with us.
There you go.
Hey, you see, you like that?
Practiced it all week.
Yeah, all week, man, in the mirror. But yeah, how you doing?
Nice first try. Good job. Good job.
Exactly.
I've heard all sorts of versions, so it's a normal anomaly when I go to the States. So I'm not used to it.
Yeah, well, it's becoming less of an anomaly now with the influx of European players across the league, so they're gonna have to start learning, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one I think was Antetokounmpo, right? When he came, that was
Yeah.
butchered by everybody.
That's
But
very butchered.
yeah. And, I mean,
Antetokounmpo.
it is. I mean, it is quite complicated, but it is like once you have the swing of it, you know, if you're a professional, you should adapt to it, and you should study the names. I actually the first person who I really saw from the commentary profession was Liam Canny. He's a British guy. He's a EuroLeague commentator, and back then he was also commentating FIBA games, and that was in Slovenia during the Eurobasket. And I was there scouting the opposing teams and preparing for our game, and he came to me without knowing me. He just saw that I had Lithuanian gear on, and he was kind of asking me for how to pronounce the names of our guys, you know, like the pronunciation, the correct pronunciation, enunciation, and things like that. And he was really precise with like Lavrinovic brothers and Kalnietis, like all those guys. Like he was really trying to get the swing of it, and that to me is the definition of a professional. You know, like just kind of really digging deep before the game about names that he's going to have to pronounce basically every other possession if they're on the floor. So that's something that every professional has to really take serious.
Yeah, no, all three of us on this panel right now have names that I'm sure have been butchered before, and I think especially as an athlete, as someone growing up wanting to get to that level, you dream of hearing, I guess in the draft, you dream of hearing your name called, and names have a lot of power behind them, like they have meaning behind them. So I think it's really important to at least attempt to get that right. For sure.
Yeah, for sure. When you're on the podium and you have to pronounce a name, and you know, it's the biggest day of the player's career probably during the draft. So like one of the first biggest days, and that usually is always, you know, correct because that's the biggest stage of the NBA at that time. So I think everybody needs to take that seriously who's in that profession, in that line of work.
For sure. But without further ado, I'll let Matas kind of take us through the story behind your name and behind the name. Let's go. Let's get it going.
Okay, so again, thank you for being here with us. And before we start going into the whole your scouting career, like early coaching career, like where the love for basketball came from, because I don't think anyone who isn't in love with basketball would go path you took. So it's was it family? Was it just basically Lithuania national team, or what gave you the passion for basketball?
Yeah, definitely family, because my father played at the highest level in at that time it was the Soviet Union, and he played for the team in Vilnius. And I remember being in the arena when I was I want to say 3 or 4 years old, and they played against the Atlanta Hawks in a preseason game. The Atlanta Hawks came to visit, and they played a tour, and I was mesmerized. That to me, it was just something else. But at that time, still shy, just kind of the Atlanta Hawks were handing out candy at halftime. I ran down, and then halfway down there, I started crying and went back. It was just too many people. But then when I moved to Germany, I wasn't exposed to a lot of basketball on TV, just because it was not just soccer is the main sport in Germany. I was 5-6 years old, but my father was playing, so I was always in the gym with him, either practices, before practices, games. So nonstop, I was always around the game, and either he was coaching or somebody else was coaching me. I flirted a little bit with soccer, with wrestling also. Like I had other sports around it that were kind of in my vicinity, but once I decided to really like shift gears to another level and commit to basketball, that was like the professional path was on my horizon, that I wanted to be a professional basketball player all my life. And then from Germany, I went to high school in the States and then college in the States. And because of injuries, it just kind of took a little bit of a side turn. And when I came back to Germany to play professionally, I still had a relatively good rookie year in the second division. And then my injuries to start getting the better of me. My stats dropped off. I had to stop playing. And I had like a wear and tear injury that was like a downstream effect of my knee injuries that I had, because until then I had 2 knee surgeries already in college. And when I stopped playing, I had to start coaching, and that's kind of like, because it took me a year and a half to recover, so I could not play at all. And once I got back, I didn't like, it didn't make sense to go back to playing, and the coaching path was the most logical path. And from there, like 4 or 5 years of coaching as assistant coach in a small club, you do everything. You do the warm-ups, you do the strength and conditioning, you do the tactics, everything. So that gave me a lot of experience already and hands-on experience. And then when CSKA called, I went and worked in Moscow for 3.5 years. And that was kind of like the turning point that I could do EuroLeague assistant coach job / video scout and national team duties at the same time for Lithuania as an assistant coach and video scout. And that took me like on a whole nother trajectory until then the Celtics picked me up 3 years later, and then it was just the rest is history. I was doing national team and Celtics for 11 years together, and now I don't do national team anymore for various purposes. But it was also now with the Celtics continuing on the journey. I'm in my 12th season, and I basically had the best of both worlds for 12 years. You know, summertime was coaching in exciting times with Olympics, World Cup, Eurobasket, a lot of new experiences with new coaches. I went through 4 or 5 different coaches in that span. So that was kind of like, it was a good eye opener. And at the same time, it helped me in my scouting job, because I was also evaluating players with their tendencies and who's really having what kind of impact during the games. And that kind of helped me in my profession that I currently do still. Just projecting young players is a little bit different than projecting professional players.
And okay, we can stick a bit with the national team, because as Lithuanians, I'm very interested to hear more about that, and like how that job to become like assistant coach of the national team came about, because like I feel like it's a big thing. And over the years, like, yeah, since 2013, it's like, no, you said 11, so it's since...
No, 13.
Oh,
Yeah.
13.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's years when we came back to actually, like, get the medals. And, like, how was the, like, as I said, like, how was the opportunity came about, like, to become an assistant coach of the national team?
Yeah, Kozlauskas was the one who brought me to CSKA, and then once they split ways and went different directions, Kozlauskas became the head coach of the national team, and he knew me already. We worked together at CSKA for 1.5 years, and it was for him a no-brainer to have somebody like me in there who does all the video work, preparation, scouting reports, and preparation for the games. So he took me on. And that was the beginning, you know, of my national team career. 2013, we won medals in 13 and 15. We got 4th place in the World Cup in 14. Should have gotten bronze. We lost to France on a really bummer at the end. And 16 Olympics, we kind of peaked too early, and that was it's a long story there. But we had a good team. We just like had a little bit of a really long preparation process that kind of took the air out of it at the end. But overall, that was the connection. Kozlauskas was the one who really appointed me, and then the next coaches kept me because they knew what they were going to get. We worked I worked on different staffs, and we had a lot of different philosophies that clash sometimes, but it came up for good decisions and good discussions. And at the end, the head coach makes always the decision. You just have to lay out the facts and your opinion to make sure that he can assess the situation correctly. And your obligation as assistant coach is to say your opinion, even though it contradicts the head coach's opinion. The head coach doesn't want yes men around him all the time. So you really need to make sure that you're always straightforward with your opinions and with your facts that you have to lay out. And if they contradict them, then you're not strong enough. You have to really be prepared for those moments. And Messina was the one who helped me prepare for those discussions, because when you came unprepared, Messina knew ways to destroy your arguments because they're weak. If there's a strawman argument, he's going to pick it apart right away. So you have to really steelman it and really be on top of your game and know the following steps. You have to know what the coach is going to ask. You have to anticipate what the head coach is going to say about your argument. So you have to have the next point ready and the next point. So you always have to think 2-3 steps ahead, and in order to have your discussion really be strong and hold against that pressure.
Yeah, and I think that would be one last question about the national team. Like, you were part of the coaching staff of that game against United States, when everyone in the USA talked about it. Like, what do you think? What was the conversation before the game? Because obviously it's a huge game for us and obviously USA, because as I said, everyone big show, we're talking in the big shows we're talking about how did we lose to Lithuania and where is Lithuania, how was the before that game?
It was normal preparation as always. We knew the players that we're going to face. That was obviously since the NBA players are closer to my territory, we're did the preparation according to the information that I had about the players, and was kind of having a presentation on the video, in the video meetings according to their talents and their tendencies. But you have to keep it really short and sweet. So it's something about really not overloading the players with a lot of information. They have to play basketball. They don't have to think about the whole time, if this guy is going this way and this guy, then we have to turn around. Or there's so many different angles of the game that you can help the player to eliminate a lot of those factors and help them be more clear in the decision making. So you have to really try not to overload their brains during the games, before the games, in preparation of the games, because they already have a lot of things that they have to process about our game, about our style, how we want to play. So there were certain things that we addressed. We had not really thought about what's going to happen after that. There was some backlash in Lithuania, because a lot of fans and a lot of experts, they wanted us to lose that game just because we shouldn't have faced Serbia. Early on we were the better team, but we kind of we didn't think about it, and we didn't want to think about it. We wanted to play our regular rotation. We did that, and we rotated actually quite more, I think, because it was up and down game. So we wanted to keep everybody fresh. So we rotated a little bit more than usual, but it really played in our favor. And plus we shot the lights out in the first half, just because emotionally, every player that steps on the court, he's competitive to the bone, and he wants to prove the best players on stage and the NBA who are playing on the national team at that point that they're better, or just as good at least, and they want to gain their respect. So that's what our players did. They got on there and they wanted to prove everyone wrong that thought that the USA is going to beat us and that they're better. We played a lot of shots came to our favor. Benjus was really hot, the Karinauskas was really showing his style of game and had some good moments against some players of the US team. And once once we catch rhythm and the confidence, then it's tough to stop us, and it was tough to stop us. But we towards the end of the game, it got close, but we held the pressure. We held on to the ball. We held on to the game and protected the lead, even though it could have easily swung around the other way. Edwards was really hard to stop. We couldn't stay in front of him, and we told him to stay away from him when we brought up the ball, but because he was going to steal it, and he did that. So we were trying to avoid him at all costs, just because of this athleticism. Was by far the best athlete in that tournament. So there was a lot of things leading up to it, but during the game, in the heat of the moment, when you're up and when everything is going your way, you're not going to mess up the team, and you're not going to manipulate the game so that you lose. You never do that. We didn't want to do that, and we wanted to be honest to the game, stay fair, stay sincere, and play as good as you can, and then let the cards fall the way they should fall. And when we got Serbia, obviously it was not a great matchup for us. They really played us tough on the ball. They guarded us really, really hard. We had a hard time getting into our offense, and the confidence fell off the cliff after that. And we played without benches because we lost them after the U.S. game with some Achilles issues. So a lot of things coincided, but I don't think any of us regrets one thing about it, just because we showed the world what that Lithuania can beat the U.S. And people say it wasn't the best U.S. team out there, but it is. At that point, it was the best U.S. team that they could put on the floor. So that's what we pride ourselves with, and we played our best basketball that day.
Yeah, I remember that game. It was sensational day, like for me, and I guess for a lot of Lithuanian fans. And I don't blame you for winning and purposely losing, but because it makes no sense. I feel like as an athlete, as a competitor, you always want to win, and especially for the national team, as you said, against the stars of USA, you always will try and play your best game and win that game. So after that game, I feel like everyone thought yeah, Serbia, it's a harder opponent than Italy, but it's competition. You have to be the best, beat the best to be the best. So it was a no-brainer for me. As you said, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, those championships, they can fall any way possible, and it's unpredictable. There's many examples of other teams where it can flip the other way. Last year Eurobasket, Germany against Latvia. If they make one more shot, it changes the whole trajectory of Germany, and they probably don't win it. So there's a lot of things in each tournament that you can find that can change tracks and change the history a little bit. But I don't regret anything. I don't think any of the coaches regret anything. I don't think the players regret anything. It's the way we showed the world. I think that we're capable of playing at that level. It's just sometimes it doesn't break your way.
And then, soon after Lithuanian job, you actually got the Boston Celtics gig. So, how that came about, because Boston Celtics, it's a huge organization, one of the best organizations out there in the NBA, and how that opportunity came about.
It's the best. We have the most banners, so it's the best, not one of the best. It came about because my first year with the CSKA, I went to scout one summer tournament, and I just did it because I wanted to get to know the next generation. And it's not for CSKA purposes, because they were not going to, at that point, the team was not going to sign a 18, 19-year-old, from a different country. So it was just kind of see what's coming up, see which tournaments to watch, and which guys to follow later on. Guys like Dubljevic at under 20, then Dennis Schroeder at under 18, Benas at under 18. Those guys were playing those tournaments, and it was kind of okay. It's at that point it was just prospects, but then they turned out to be real players. And I was Mirotic was also at under 20s, I think, for Spain. So that was those guys. People still talk about those guys, and I just went there to get to know them. And my future boss at that time, Austin Ainge, was also in Poland in a random gym watching Dennis Schroeder play, and he approached me because he saw me jotting some stuff down in my notebook, and I was just sitting there by myself. I didn't know anybody really. I was just basically a freshman on campus that did not know anybody of the basketball world. And he approached me, he introduced himself, and that was just kind of a sliding door moment. If that day I would have sat somewhere else on the other side, he would not have seen me. Maybe I would have met him in a different context, and it's a different context means different history, so different pathway. And we stayed in touch. The year after that, in the summertime, it kind of approached me, and but once Kazlauskas left the team, I was still under contract, but he was kind of approaching me to see if I was interested in joining a role and having an interview with the Celtics. But I had a guaranteed contract, and I didn't want to sacrifice my contract for an interview. And I was just still like Messina was coming in, and I had a chance to learn a lot more. And I was just, the 2 years before I was in second division Germany, then CSKA, then NBA. It was all too fast for me. So it at that point I was just kind of trying to understand what's going on, and I preferred to stay under like a higher role with Messina and more responsibilities and new information, new type of thinking. And I don't regret a thing. We stayed in touch with Austin for those 2 years after that. We exchanged information about players, which he was scouting, which we were scouting from the NBA. And it all like a full circle moment. Then 2 years later, Messina leaves. I still have a contract because mine was overcrossing with the coaches. And I decided to leave because then the Celtics offered me a 3-year contract in a role where I could live basically wherever I want to in Europe and be an international scout. And it was something that I was just kind of considering in the beginning, but there was my best friend who was there at that time, he was like, there's no wrong answer here. Either you stay, you go, it's the right decision. You're choosing between good and good, great and great, basically on whether it's for Europe or the NBA cycle. So I decided to go with the Celtics just because, also mostly because it's the Celtics, and the Celtics don't come around every day. And that was the second time it came around, which was more concrete and more straight to the point. And I felt like that was the time to jump. So I jumped, and the rest is history.
Well, I feel like that's every person who's into basketball, after basketball, but wasn't able to make it to the top level as a player, or to be part of an organization like that is I feel like everyone's dream. And so now then, for continuing on the scouting stuff, then I'll let Josh now do his part of the conversation.
No, it was awesome. I was just like, I'm a nerd when it comes to this stuff, so I was just enjoying, man. But yeah, no, as an international scout, and especially with the unique path you've got probably the best perspective to understand kind of what this influx of international players has looked like, the evolution of that. So what do you think is behind that? Do you think it's more access to the high level? Do you think it's maybe back in the day more players would just stay in Europe, would just stay domestically? Or what do you think is the cause of this? Because it's top to bottom now. It's obviously, for most people, if they give their top 5, it is going to be all international players. But now there's a bit more of a depth to it as well. You're seeing every year players are being drafted and signed over. So what do you think is behind that?
I think there's a little bit of luck also in regards to those generational talents appearing, and because it has become a global game over the last 20 years or so. There's a lot more attention. There's a lot more access to information. The world is way more connected, through the internet, through social media. If you look at it, what was going on in the 90s versus now, and how the information was relayed to the NBA versus now is day and night. You can basically see everything on your phone right away. Any kind of highlights or any kind of names, whether it's on X or Instagram. There's guys with scouting services that catch the kids early, and the names are out there right away. So you start tracking them when they're 14, 15, 16. I'm not. There's too young for me, but there's a lot of organizations or let's say colleges, for example, they track them a lot earlier. Now you got a college factor going into this whole equation, because lot of players going over to the U.S. to colleges now more than to the NBA. So that's a different twist to the whole equation. But overall, I think that the world changed in 20 years. Not necessarily the game, it's the game also, but not necessarily the players. The players always existed in the sense that you have always good players in Europe, but the generational talents. I mean, you had Sabonis in the 80s, 90s. You had Marciulionis, you had Dirk Nowitzki that came in late 90s. Like you had guys coming in from Europe that are Peja Stojakovic, a lot of divas. Like you had those guys. You always had guys that are coming from Europe and impacting the game at the highest level. And even though there was maybe early on a little bit of a like, who is this guy? Then they had to earn their way and earn their way. Dražen Petrovic, he was really undervalued when he came in, and he had to prove his way. And just those guys, who knows what would have been, with Dražen and with Sabonis if they would have come in earlier. And if Dražen obviously would have lived, then they would have had a completely different story. But then end of 90s, early 2000s, internet appears. A lot more information gets out there. The world is more connected to Europe. You don't have VHS tapes anymore. I mean, you still have VHS tapes until probably, I don't know, 2005, 6, 7. Like they're still watching 2000. Then DVDs came out, and it's easier to send information across seas. You don't have to ship them, because back then videotapes were shipped from Europe to the US. Like you had VHS tapes shipped from one continent to another. That's already hindrance. Then you have bad quality. All of a sudden, travel gets easier. People are way more connected through social media, through all those channels. It's easier to make a connection, and that's what my job is about. Having the right connections and having the right people around you to help each other in whichever way possible, and get the right information about the players. Where back then, 20 years ago, it was a lot more difficult, to get to know somebody in person. You have to fly over, meet the right person, and hopefully it's the right person. Hopefully it's not somebody that's just telling you something that is not right. So now I think that because it's so easily accessible and easily connected, easier to have like these conversations like we're having right now, a lot more information is being analyzed. Plus the statistics world has really accelerated. So you have advanced statistics that help them also contextualize the strength of each league and the strength of each team and how the impact of each player on wins and losses. And all those things help to really get the best players out of Europe, South America, Asia, wherever that is. So that's those. I think overall it's just that the world has really changed and made it more easily to analyze and cross compare, and travel's got better. So those things I think have changed. The players, they come and go.
Yeah, and as that exposure has improved, what have you noticed in terms of the pathways and the systems in terms of youth development? You've heard, I think back in the day, Kobe Bryant would talk about how Europe is far ahead in terms of the AAU system in America and how that's developing players. What do you believe is the best system right now that you've seen that most often produces the best players?
I don't think there's one right answer for a system. I think,
or I guess what are the advantages and disadvantages that you see then?
Yeah, I think it's a case by case. You have to really analyze which player, because the player path is different for each of them. Whether they go to the US, whether they stay home and they develop in their home system, whether it's a big team in your own country, or if you go abroad internationally in within Europe and you develop your game on a big team in a different country. There's a different answer for every prospect, because there's a personality that comes into play. Is the kid mentally made for that? Is he mentally ready to go abroad and be by himself and learn the language and be culturally? Is he an introvert and he's going to shrink and he's going to come back home? All those things matter. And I think that the systems, obviously there's good development programs and bad development programs. You have to really make your research in terms of what the coaches are putting on the table and what kind of program they're putting out there for you to develop. And there's teams that have a track record of developing players and bringing them out to the league, or bringing them out to higher teams in Europe. I think that the fundamental skills and the fundamentals in Europe are further ahead because you have less athleticism and less, on average, you have less athleticism and less physical impact than in the US. So you have to really teach the players of how to gain an advantage with footwork, with your brain, with knowing where to stand, knowing when to cut, knowing what to do without the ball, because most of the game is being played without the ball. Whereas in the US, a lot of focus is on the ball and how to play with the ball and how to create and how to use your athleticism and your first step to your advantage in order to create an advantage. And then maybe pass it, maybe not. Maybe you're gonna do it, to finish it yourself because you're stat hungry. But all the scouts, all the coaches see the right decision making in the right circumstances. Is the player making the right basketball play every time, or is he looking more? Is he thirsty for his own stats? So then you have the parent factor. I know that the parents in the U.S. also are very impactful in regards to controlling the narrative and very very much demanding of their kid to playing a lot of minutes. And it's because also you can't forget about the scholarship factor. The college scholarship is a big factor that takes off a big burden of the parents. So I understand the involvement and the investment in the kids. In Europe, it's less so. The system, the educational system is just different. And you have kids that are going to programs that are projected to play, and then if they're good enough or not, then they're gonna play. And usually, you're hoping that your kid is gonna find this niche and find his way through, judging by the development program that the team is putting on the table, because the decision is different for a high level prospect than it is for a mid level prospect, or a low level prospect. Like what role is he going to have? Is he going to play with the pro team also? Is he going to practice with the pro team only? Is he going to stand on the sideline after the warm-ups and just watch the pro team practice? Then then where is he going to get his reps? Is he going to go to the second division and get his reps? Is he going to play for the junior team and gain his advantages that way? So there's a lot of different questions to ask for each parent and each prospect before they make the decision. So they really have to find the program that fits the mold the best.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then lately in the league, I guess maybe this year especially, but in the last couple of years, the big buzzword has been tanking. Obviously, I'll say it for you. You don't have to say it. The Celtics have never engaged in tanking whatsoever in their history. So we'll get that out of the way. But I guess I want to be smart about how I ask you this question, but do you think it's as prevalent, not from a specific organizational point of view, but do you think it's as much of an issue as it's being stated right now? And do you have any thoughts on this? I mean, there's rumors about flattening the odds again of the draft, and I guess even for the Celtics especially, how much does current draft position affect your role? I guess, like if you're projected to have a higher pick or not. Does it affect the way that you carry out your scouting, or does it really not impact that?
It doesn't impact that because you have to prepare for all scenarios. You never know during the draft which scenarios can open up. So there's some likely scenarios and some unlikely scenarios. Because there's always so many trades that can happen during the draft, and you have to be ready for the players that are in a different range than your original pick. So you have to essentially scout and be prepared for the whole draft, not only your range. Your range you should know the best because you should know the value of your pick, but you also should really investigate and scout the other ranges that are before you, after you, because you may in the heat of the moment you're going to have to make a decision whether you want to trade up or trade down depending on what offers are on the table. So those things to us, like we always want to win, no matter what, because we're building a culture of winning, and that holds ground, and that's something that's more sustainable than fluctuating from year to year. So that's never been a topic of conversation for us. We always want to do the best that we can possibly put the best roster on the table that we can possibly do, and go from there. So for us, that nothing changes. We do our job as we usually do. Whichever pick we have. And then then you also have to know the following classes, because you also scouting the grassroots and next classes, which is stronger, which picks can be more valuable in the future. So all those things you have to take in consideration as well.
Yeah, and then in recent years, we've seen with the team building franchises like yourselves, like the Spurs and the Thunder right now that seem to be winning, have used a lot of their later picks and their even undrafted players, and even drafting older players. Do you think there's been a shift in terms of, I guess a few years back, it was kind of, if you want a one and done 18-year-old prospect, it was kind of like it's over. Whereas now you're seeing a lot more of these teams being willing to use those older talents that are a bit more proven, ready to contribute straight away.
Yeah, it always depends what's available in your range and your pick, and then you make a decision in regards to your roster, because you have to know which roster spots and you have available and how you want to fill them. Do you want to fill them with somebody that's young and you see the prospect that you want to invest in? Then you take a long-term play and you draft somebody that you want to develop, and you have enough firepower on your roster that you can sustain that, and hopefully that pick turns into somebody that's going to be a rotational player or a starter, down the line. If you see that you have really enough pieces, and you don't see somebody that is a young prospect that you want to invest in, then you take a senior or older guy that's ready to play and ready to contribute right away and fill a role specifically for your need of the roster. So it always depends on the situation and the context of your team and the roster that you have available, which players you have on the contract, and how you want to go proceed long term. So in the heat of the moment, you got to know which players are ranked where on your board and who you want to invest in long term or short term.
Yeah, is there a prospect that you've ever kind of scouted, maybe from early on, that you've kind of seen through, you've seen the Celtics then draft and been kind of like proud of how that, I guess, how that transpired, and thought, okay, we hit on this one from from scouting from early on?
I mean, that's like the ones that we drafted, they were in and out. I mean, Yabusele was a guy that came in probably a bit too early. We had him 1 year in China, and then he came over, had to come back to Europe, and then he came back to the NBA. So it's kind of those things, they can twist and turn every way possible. Then we had Daniel Theis, who came in as a free agent, and that was something that was he came in and as a minimum player and tried to find his way into rotation and try to find his way as an impactful player that he can help as a role player early on, because most of the time superstars from Europe or stars from Europe have a hard time coming in and being ball dominant players in the NBA. So those role players that can fill roles when we have superstars around them are probably easier plug and play situations. So you have to really look for those gems that it can help your roster grow and be stronger with somebody that's maybe on a like not a superstar salary, but somebody that can fill that role with a smaller salary, because you always have to take the salary cap into consideration in terms of how you allocate your money. So Daniel was somebody that turned out very nice, and he'll end up being a starter for us in the conference finals. So it's something that works in mysterious ways, and it's always hard to project into like how it's going to translate. That's why all the information you gather and everything that you gather about that person, about from the coaches, from the surroundings, is very important in order to know who and what you're getting. And at the end of the day, that's going to determine if your roster is going to be strong enough to win and to be long enough in the playoffs.
Yeah, and then draft night is probably one of the biggest nights of the year for you guys, especially in your department. I'm not sure if you have much like war room experience if you travel over, but what is like a draft night like from your perspective? If you could take us behind the scenes.
Yeah, I was fortunate. I'm fortunate to have seen all the war war room nights there since I've been there, and so 12. This is going to be the 12th time, and it's really it's unique because every draft is unique, right? So you have to really kind of you have a pick. Early on we had picks in the lottery almost every year, and then we had picks that are in the late first round every year. So And those are different types of drafts, because sometimes you're right on from the beginning, and sometimes you have to wait for an hour until you pick, because you see everything is taking a while. Now you have 2 days of draft, so you have two draft days. It's interesting how the discussions leading up to it happen, and what kind of scenarios you're going through. And I'm not the one making the phone calls to the other teams. We have guys that are qualified for that and have the roles obligated to them. So they're the ones that are contact. They split the teams up amongst our group, who's making the phone calls with certain teams. And then they gather information get a feel for what trades could happen and what trades could be available, which players are on the table to discuss. And then you have to make a decision, whether it's on the clock or right before, where you can exchange information with the other team and then call in a trade or pick the guy that you want to pick. And last year we picked Hugo, and Hugo is turning out really nicely, and he's been a really good contributor this year for us as a rookie, especially. So those things are interesting, because late first round you just kind of see guys getting picked off your lineups, off your draft board, and you still guessing of who's going to be available there, so. You better have done your work until then, in order to know who you want to pick and who's going to be the right fit for your program, because we really go deep on a lot of players, and we want to make sure that we know who we're getting as a person, first of all, because that person is going to be impacting your locker room, is going to be impacting your culture, and we got to make sure that he's a Celtic all around.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Zooming out. Across your whole career, there's been a mass evolution in terms of the way that championship teams have been built. We've seen, I guess, maybe towards the earlier part of your career, where there wasn't as much of an emphasis on spacing. You'd have bigger. The complexion of the league was very different than maybe those Warriors years, where a lot of teams swung in the direction of 3-point shooting. Your team is very, very 3-point. What would you say is the main, because I think we're seeing now is a lot of versatility, especially wing depth. In terms of building a team in 2026, what are the things that you take into consideration when you're looking for talents that fit your team?
Yeah, man, we have Jayson, Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, right, as our 1-2 punch, basically. So we're trying to make sure that we know who we need to build around to have them be productive as well, and who can be contributors to help them be to all of us, for all of us to look great. So it's about the roster construction around our superstars, and to see how we want to play is going forward is that we want to be tough on defense and then run and shoot threes and get dunks. It's all about it's dunks and layups or threes. So this year we wasn't able to get enough dunks and layups, and that's why it was kind of hard to generate other shots. We had a lot of good looks from the 3-point line, also towards the end of Game 7, but it's sometimes the penny doesn't drop that way. So it's the way we want to play is what we saw in the last couple of years. We're very physical. We're up and down team. We are definitely 3-point oriented, and we look to make more threes than twos, more threes than contested twos, because contested twos obviously from mid range are a big no-no in today's analytical world. But we also have players who can do that, in Jayson, Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. So those guys are elite players that are able to create and generate those kind of looks. But at the same time, they're able to generate looks for other players because they can gain advantages much easier than other players can. And we are an unselfish team. We are playing for each other. And then you have guys who are like Peyton Pritchard who come off the bench and are productive for us in every possible way and can get into the paint at will, basically. So there's a variety of ways, and I think the best way to play is to be unpredictable and to be somewhat hard to guard in many regards, that you have to have different weapons on the floor at different times. And yeah, that's something that we strive for, and we want to be one of those teams that is hard to guard.
Yeah, and you mentioned obviously that's a formula that won you a championship a couple of seasons back. But I guess you haven't gone as far as you wanted to the last two. How much do you, if at all, do you? Well, you of course not overreact, but how much does the where you finish in the playoffs determine kind of how you're approaching these next few months going into the off season in terms of your scouting? And do you, so obviously eliminated last week, do you go, okay, based off that series, okay, we've got some holes here, this is what we need to plug in? Or do you take more of a macro view of, okay, no, this has worked over the last couple of seasons, we just need to tweak and find what we can fit to reinforce what we've already built?
That's a question that I would prompt everybody to look for the answer. And our last press conference with Brad Stevens, he answered it very nicely. So he's the one to talk about that, more qualified than I am.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, I'll switch gears a little bit. So there's been rumors about a European NBA league coming about. What do you think is, like, first, yeah, what are your like initial thoughts about the prospect of that?
I think generally speaking, I think it's an interesting idea. It just depends on what kind of quality teams will be playing in that league early on, whether or not they're able to find a deal with the EuroLeague teams and to have the majority of the EuroLeague teams hopefully in that league if that league happens, because the early on quality of the league is going to determine the trajectory of the league. If you have teams that are not as high quality, not as high of a fan base, not as much of a history, then it's going to be difficult and a more longer path to build. When you bring teams in that have a history, have a fan base already, and have had success in the past, and you combine it with teams that are on the horizon in big cities that bring in big investments, it's always good to have more money in the ecosystem. It's just a matter of how to use that money at the end of the day. If you are really productive and really smart with how to use it and how to invest it. But the more attention there is to the league, the better it is for everybody. So I think the media rights will be a big thing to make sure that those are distributed properly and that everybody has a gain from that. So the upside, I think, would be huge. It's just a matter of really figuring out the bits and pieces that of which teams are going to be in it, what the media money is going to look like. Those splits matter a lot, especially for the small market teams. But if you have teams in all the big cities in Europe, and you're going to make it attractive basketball with the best players in Europe, then it's going to be a successful league. If it's going to be a slow start, then it's going to be a long process.
Lastly, you've got a pretty exciting event coming up this summer. We want to give you the floor to kind of, tell us more about that. And I'm sure we'll have some questions about that too.
Yeah, we have a summit. It's called B8 Summit. B8summit.com it's where it's at. that's where you go for the information and for the tickets. It's to me, my goal is to have it to create a think tank for all sports, and now it's predominantly basketball, but we invited also a scout from Bayer Leverkusen who's going to talk about the African scouting process and how soccer teams scout Africa and then implement the players into their systems, how to bring over and what they look for. So all those things we discuss on stage with the professionals that we're going to have in. Maurizio Gherardini, Ettore Messina, Chris Fleming. Then we're going to have a round table with Denis Adomaitis, Tommy Belchidis from Žalgiris. Adomaitis is currently working in Japan, and Benas, who's currently in the Final Four of the Champions League with Ritas. And then we're going to have also Regef Fanan, who's the strength and conditioning coach from Maccabi. We're all going to talk about on stage, not about tactics, but more about the game behind the game, the things that matter the most, the dynamics behind the scenes, how to build your staff, how to communicate properly with your staff, how to build a culture. There's a lot of things to learn, especially from a person like Maurizio Gherardini, who's has so much experience in terms of running teams, organizations, as well as leagues now. So those things I think matter not only for the basketball professional, but also for the business professional who wants to know of how to be a leader. So to me, this is more of a think tank of leaders in sports. And the workshops that we have are behind closed doors in small groups with 15 people that are no cameras, and they just talk shop about whatever the coaches want to know, the managers that are going to Maurizio, and they want to ask of how the conversations were, the hard conversations behind the scenes were with the coaches that he had or with the players that he had. all those things that can be discussed behind closed doors with nobody really watching. Only those 15 people in a room will know. So I wanted to open up the floor and the discussion to those coaches to have an opportunity in one place to talk to all of those people. We're going to have a closing ceremony and a meet and greet type of dinner on a rooftop with VIPs and those ticket holders for that specific event. Then all that, the round table is going to be in Lithuanian with Tommy Balčytis, Dainius Adomaitis, and Giedrius Benas, who are going to talk about the cultural differences because they all worked abroad at one time, and see what the adjustments are in new cultures and what they have to look for and how the adjustments were in different countries and different cultures, as well as statistics, because Tommy is running the statistics platform basically for Žalgiris and London Lions, and they're creating a tool that they're gonna probably sell to organizations and leagues around the world, and that's based on play-by-play data in Europe that they and with the help of AI to see what lineups work, which way a team should structure their rotation pattern and things like that. So all those things we're going to talk about, and we're going to have breaks in between to I don't call it network, but just kind of get to know each other a little bit better behind the scenes. And we're going to have sponsors there like Kinexon, who's our gold sponsor. Also last year they kicked us off. So those things in the breaks are, I think, a lot also very important, because you get to know the people behind the scenes, and you get to network and to create bonds for the future. Because at the end of the day, when you hire and you get new jobs, you hire the person first and then the professional. You need to know the person really well, and I want to create a stage where people can get to know each other.
Yeah, I'm sure with your story and how you spoke about getting your opportunities probably played a big role in you wanting to facilitate that for up and coming.
Exactly. Yeah, it came a long way. Like, people underestimate the value of a relationship. It's like the power of a relationship and the power of trust is such a big driver of future success in your career, because you create a platform where you can exchange information on a really sincere basis, because you're not afraid that he's gonna take advantage of you in one way or the other. So you trust that person, and that trust can go a long way, because sometimes the doors open that you really would not expect to open. So you always have to be ready when the door is open, and then it's up to you to really get through the door and make sure that you're productive and you deserve that.
I believe it's your second year running this, right?
Yeah, second summer.
Yeah. So what have you kind of seen already from, I guess, the people that started off last year? Have you seen in terms of continued conversations and networking that's gone beyond just that?
Yeah, there was people always ask about what the next event is going to be like. Are we going to change something because it was sold out last year and we're on track to sell out this year? And people were curious about the guests, obviously, throughout the year, who we're going to bring in. And it was not just going to be one-off, because we always wanted to continue it and continue to raise the bar. We set the bar pretty high last year, so it's kind of hard to outgrow us this year, but we're trying our best. And there was one person that came to the event and got signed the following week. So it's not a job market, but I want to create a summer league in Europe of my own. So it's something that I think that people also, once they go there and get to know each other, they have enough space and room to talk to each other and have different conversations. And who knows what job can come around from there.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. If you just remind when it is again.
July 8th in Vilnius, Lithuania.
Perfect.
Yeah, b8summit.com. That's where you can find all the information.
Awesome. Make sure you get your tickets. You might be the next assistant international scout for the Celtics.
There you go.
Yeah. But no, thank you so much for your time, Benas. Thank you. Super insightful conversation. And
thanks for the invite. Thanks. We made it happen.
Yeah, finally.
Finally. Without further ado, that was a Full Court Talk podcast. And we're out.